To begin.
Hey, what is up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Social Primate Podcast. This is the final episode of 2023, and today my guest is J.T the L.A Storyteller.
Hey.
What's up, man?
What's going on, Eddie? It's so good to be here with you, man.
Thank you for making it happen. I did your podcast just a few weeks ago.
Yes.
But dude, thank you so much for making it just on a short notice and helping me wrap up the show for the year.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I'm so happy to be on the Social Primate Podcast. Shout out to all the Social Primate listenership. Keep holding it down. Keep taking this show to the next level. I'm so happy to be a part of the journey. You already know.
Yeah. I like how you put that, the journey, because that's what I think when we get started with something, you don't imagine what it's going to take you through. You know, it's kind of the ups and downs. And before you know it, you call it the journey. And it's like, hell yeah, this is it.
For real. Yeah, 100%. You don't know that you're going to meet all these different people, that you're going to engage or encounter all these different spaces, that you're going to break into a whole other world out there. One that you might have been able to imagine, but that is a great pleasure to actually get through day by day. And certainly in hindsight, when you look back and you can say, yeah, we did that, like with this year.
Yeah, no, dude. Well, first and foremost, for the people who are for the first time coming across yourself and your show, can you give us a little bit of background about the stuff that you've been doing over the last couple of years?
100%, Eddie. And again, thank you so much for having me on. I go by JT. That's for Jimbo Times. And my website and podcast is J.T the L.A Storyteller. That's either jimbotimes.com or J.T the L.A Storyteller podcast. And man, it's just like city-based work. It's like a lot of love for the urban jungle out here, right? Like in our youth, it was just the concrete jungle. And in our youth, it was kind of like the city that you just gotta keep a close lookout over your shoulder through. But now it's kind of like, man, if I've spent all this time in the city and I have a little bit of information about the ins and outs, the cuts, the people here, the culture here, the open secrets here, and there's a whole audience out there that could actually use some of this info, that could actually benefit from engaging more of the city through this way, then yeah, let's do it. So I really love the written word, or I'm kind of a bookworm. I'm a little bit of like a bibliophile. So LA Public Library is like my jam, 100%. In fact, I was at the LA Public Library just earlier today, and I love that as a space, like a free and open resource. Anybody and everybody who walks into the library is welcome there. And to me, creating something similar through Jimbo Times or J.T the L.A Storyteller is really important to keep that legacy going, especially as the city and as the country continues kind of like getting deeper and deeper into this gap between the rich and the poor and those who are well-resourced versus those who are not. For me, it's kind of like the same things I picked up at the LAPL or the LA Public Library. That's really what I want Jimbo Times, the LA Storyteller, to do over the course of time, wherever we go in this new media space, that is virtually or online or wherever else we need to be.
Well, something I really love about podcast itself, and your podcast is very informative. Like one thing that I very much look forward to is just like the amount of information that I'm going to get from the podcast. And again, from a perspective of a person who could be our neighbor, it could be just somebody down the street that we never kind of encountered, but you're able to provide that information in a very digestible way. Especially with what you're doing, you're creating an archive of what's happening in these times right now in Los Angeles, which is crazy because 50 years from now, when we're looking back at it, like books, we're like, damn, what was the time like in 1960 or whatever it was? And we're here right now, and you're helping kind of create that history,
I love that you use the word archives, because I very much think of it that same way. I very much think of it the way that you go to the library and walk down the aisles or through the bookshelves and you see an endless amount of information at your disposal. And for people out there who may not have direct physical access to a library, wherever they may be tuning in from, they nevertheless have access through our voices and through the time that we take to craft something for their record keeping and for the ultimate record keeping, which is kind of like something that belongs to all of us, something that belongs to the whole human species. And so I very much see it that way. I very much see people kind of going through podcasts the way that they might go through library bookshelves somewhere. And I'm like all there for it, because everybody gets a little bit of their info in a slightly different capacity. For me, this is very natural because we're speaking to the people, speaking with the people, not necessarily speaking for the people, but certainly speaking up in terms of their right to be heard.
Yeah, one thing that you kind of just brought up right now, and it resonates with me because on the last episode that I had with Jag Arriola, he mentioned that sometimes you can only get so much history from books or from stuff that you go and you educate yourself on, but you don't really get a cultural perspective into your on feet on the ground with the community, and you're really figuring out what it is that matters to them. And that's when you get a whole new sense of who these people are, where they're coming from, you know? So I think it's really cool. Again, these podcasts like fucking do more things and sometimes you can think of with just a book. I'm not saying not to read a book, people, go read your books, but again, sometimes you hear these stories from actual people's voices and how they think and process things.
That's right. And I've been very privileged to collaborate with different storytellers out there, folks such as yourself and also other peers, other folks who are in this space, other people who are really trying to document these times and let it be known, let the whole city know that we're still here, that we're still pushing through, that even as, again, the gap between the rich and the poor continues to widen, someone spoke up, somebody said something, and we remain a part of that. For me, it's kind of irresistible.
Now, one thing for sure that I feel like you touch base on a lot is just community empowerment, you know, and I think that's one thing that I've been kind of gravitating towards the last couple of months, even this year. It's just community building and finding ways of bringing people together. It's very hard, you know, and even people in my community, Karehe, you know, there's people who I don't know and I wish that I did know, just because it's our community, you know, we should be at least connected to a point where we know what's going on and we can inform each other and be like, hey, I know that guy can give me this information and so on and so forth, rather than just being disconnected and then not even knowing what's going on in your local government.
100%. And it's so interesting that you mentioned this, because I noted to you that I was at the library just earlier and I was getting through the second chapter of this book I've been on. It's Avengers of the New World. I believe the author's name is Jack Du Bois, but it's all about the Haitian Revolution and kind of what led up to the Haitian Revolution from 1790 through 1804. And something that I found really impressive about the notes on this 14-year struggle for independence from slavery out in what was known as Saint-Domingue, which is now Haiti, was that folks from different, obviously enslaved bodies from different parts of Africa came together on this island where there were indigenous people at some point before they died specifically or particularly through smallpox, and also just a flat out massacres by the colonizers because they sort of refused to abide by their new protocols for the island. What I found really interesting was that after all this time, these slaves, they would get together after hours, basically, say that the workday is finished, say that they now have not necessarily time for leisure, but just time on their own. And what was really powerful, including for witnesses back then, to see was when these slaves actually, through voodoo, formed these rituals and performed these rituals and actually basically called out to higher powers so that they could tap in and connect and even sometimes make request of the higher powers. And the masters at the time, they noted that this was going on. They tried to place in some preventative measures. They tried to prohibit them from coming together, but these slaves or enslaved people came together again and again through voodoo. It was unstoppable. And so that was time in community. Even folks who didn't necessarily speak the same language, who came from different parts of this massive continent, they somehow still got together, and they needed to get together. Eventually, voodoo is one of several factors that contributes to the uprising and the eventual revolution against the masters there. And so it's like, man, it's fascinating to think that this community space and this time together actually ends up being so integral to something larger. You can't necessarily see it right away, but all those cumulative effects add up, and boom, before you know it, the entire paradigm has shifted for sure.
Dude, that's really cool. Because I recently asked myself that question, like, what will it take for the community to come together? From what I understood is that we need one common thing to kind of unite us, right? And although I feel like there's many things that we can kind of hold on to or latch on together as a community, there's still a lot of division. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what is causing that division? That's just like a general question for myself. Like, what is causing this division? Like, what is stopping us from being empowered all together? And it's a tricky thing.
I love it too, because you're thinking like a planner. You're thinking a little bit like a visionary. You're asking yourself a little bit about the dots that exist between one end and the next, and you're wondering about what will bridge these dots, or what will bridge the space in between them. And I'm very much there with you, and it's for that reason that I look forward to collabing with you and developing further with you whatever it is that we can to get to more of these spaces and to bring more and more of these communities together, because again, it's cumulative. All that work that you place in, just like the way that we get to look back at 2023 and see all that we've done, is the same way that we're going to look back one day on this podcasting work and the various other methods we've deployed to try and bridge the gaps here between our neighborhoods, between our people, between the culture, because it's a must. It's just what we have to do at the end of the day.
Based on your opinion, since you've been able to talk to different people working in the community, right, or trying to make change in these communities, like, what is what's the recurring message that you see?
I think that's a great question. What you're asking about right there is like, hey, if you've gotten to speak with one side of the city and then the next, like, is there a common thread? Is there a reason that maybe they're not able to get together as much as one might hope? I think that's a fabulous way to think a little bit about how a lot of different communities are faced with what's in front of them. Mm-hmm. And I think they spend so much time working on what's in front of them that it can be difficult to look at a larger whole, to look at a bigger picture, and to say, here's where we fit. Let's go ahead and do our part with respect to our neighbors there and fill up the space that way. I think that there's just a slightly difficult path ahead of us, in that, like, if we've spent so much time kind of engaged strictly in our own neighborhoods and strictly on our own side of town, then it is a little difficult to break in elsewhere and learn a little bit about what other folks are getting through out there and how they're pushing past. And yet that's such an important part of how we do any of this. And this is true, like, at the community level. It's also true, like, at the city governing level. Like, you've probably seen that I've spoken with some of these different elected officials out in the city, and very similarly for them, it's kind of like they have a city and then a county and then they have a state and then the federal government, and all these things need to be coming together in order for them to achieve their maximal effect out for our communities or in these neighborhoods. And the same is true for us, where it's like, we are in LA, but there's also something going out in Houston. There's also something going down in Philly. There's also something going down in Chicago. And little by little, I think, depending on what we define as progress, what we want to see in 2024 as, let's say, folks east of the river, or let's say Black and brown communities or communities of color, depending on what we define, that's what we'll work towards. And I think we're still in that phase of defining what's next for ourselves. We have to identify what it is that we're looking for, so that we can gradually make some inroads there, right? We want to know where we want to go before we start doing the work to get there. And up to a point, we've just been doing this work because it's what's called us. And now I really appreciate where you're coming from, in that it's kind of like, what can I do to take it to the next level, to move it up just a little further, to tune that dial up just a little more. And I'm with it, and together I think we can definitely make some impacts out there.
Hell yeah. I mean, it starts with the little changes. It starts with those connections, you know? Like I'm big on like a collective or collaboration work, you know, or just doing stuff like this. And it took a while for me to get to this point, because even now I'm a victim. I'm not even a victim. Because I'm not a victim. I'm actually stopping myself. So I'm the, what is that, perpetrator of it?
Oh yeah, self-sabotage. But yeah,
there you go. I'm sabotaging myself because I feel like, you know, you were having this conversation about like, hey, you got to be involved in your community. You got to do all this stuff. But am I taking any action? Am I going to the city council meetings? Like, no, I'm not, you know? And I think one of those biggest things for me happens to be the timing. Like I have to work, you know? Yeah. And I feel like that's a lot of us. We have to work. The council meetings are after work. You're like, fuck, I don't want to go. I want to stay home. You know, I just got out of work. And I feel like sometimes there's a lot of disconnect in that form where the people want to do something, but, you know, bureaucracy, just timing is like, fuck, it doesn't add up, you know?
I appreciate you saying that so much, because I think that's what people out there need to hear and understand about working people's everyday lived experience, and that's what they need to work to bridge a little more succinctly. The fact that you noted that, like, hey, I gotta like make my bread and butter from this time to this time, and it just so happens that the only city hall, city council, county meetings also take place during that time. Like, what you're saying is you can't be in two places at once, and I think that you're very much onto something. So then for me, the question is one, how do we get like your perspective over to the city level? How do we get one of them to tune into the Social Primates podcast and hear straight up from working people? And then the next question is like, all right, if that 9 to 5 isn't available, is there one more day that we can identify on the calendar that's going to work for everybody? Just like with everything else, right? You and I had to want to make this meeting happen.
Exactly.
And after enough time and patience, actually, lo and behold, here we are. And I very much feel that way about most of what is out there. I think it requires a lot of intention. It also requires patience. It also requires going back to the drawing board. As you know, we've done that several times with our podcast or these other creative projects. And it's like, hey, that's the journey. So let's make it work one way or the other. Certainly we're not the first nor the last who are going to have to do it. So
exactly,
let's get to it.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I you know, when I was doing my research that kind of I wanted to build on was like the influence that like Nipsey Hussle's message, you know, that his whole about community empowerment, being financially empowered as well. Like, I feel like you mentioned that this was kind of a relation to, or not a relation, but some inspiration for you to start this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the pieces line up. Like Nipsey Hussle being from the city of LA, being from the Crenshaw Slauson area / neighborhood, all that is a lot of love. And it's like, it's very historic, because if you asked people about LA like 20 years ago, most people, if you ask people what they thought when you asked them about LA, most of them would probably know, oh, Rodney King and like the riots, and like isn't that the city that like nearly burned down because of the gangs and the ghetto and all this mayhem out there? And to me, starting from there up to a point, which is like around the time you and I were born, is a really interesting starting point, because I have asked how we got there first, and then who has stood up and made a claim to try and craft together a new chapter for us. And Nipsey is someone that I loved to listen to just long before his more community-based work, his more specific community-based work. But as time passed on and I tapped in to Nipsey's message of community ownership and self-reliance and autonomy for these neighborhoods, I realized, man, he's really onto something with this, and I'm excited about where it might go. Obviously, so much changed with his tragic and unforeseen passing, and I think that that's also something to continue tapping into as communities out here, like how we how we make sure that our leaders and their legacies are not strictly with them, so that once these leaders go, those legacies go with them. For me, it's kind of like, let's try and build in something that stands the test of time so that our neighborhoods carry forward, certainly still grieving the loss of our leaders, but nonetheless making sure that we are crafting a better world the way they would want us to. And so for me, Nipsey Hussle is very much about that, and there's more to it as well. There are far more Nipsey Hussles than we know about. They're out there, like, on the ground. And J.T. the L.A Storyteller podcast is very much dedicated to tapping in with them and letting the whole city know, step by step.
You know what? That's what I found really cool, because me personally, I didn't even know about Nipsey until maybe a couple weeks after he passed, man. That was the first time I was like, Nipsey? Who's Nipsey Hussle? And usually when something like that happens, a lot of people tend to gravitate to check out their art form now. Like, oh, okay, let me find out who this was, right? So I started listening to his music. My first impression was like, dang, he's singing about like powerful shit, like stuff that, again, this is just for me, right? When you have the first impression of somebody, I see Nipsey, he looks like a thug, right? He was all tatted up, braided up. You know, he looked like somebody who actually lived in that general area,
right?
But his thoughts, the way he carried himself, the way he wanted to empower community, that to me sent like shivers down my spine, because it was like somebody that looked like, he obviously doesn't look like me, but somebody that I can relate to in the struggle. And I was like, hell yeah, that made me feel more powerful. Just like how I feel that people who do podcasts like such as these, like for yourself, I'm like, hell yeah, because you're a sort of Nipsey Hussle in that sense too. You are that person who looks like us regular folk, but is trying to make a change in the community. And that's what we need. We need visuals of people who look and represent our communities to carry these messages on. And then you can still look like a regular dude and still be, carrying this powerful message around.
Right. And interesting note about Nipsey Hussle is that he was vegan. And that even at the funeral, his mom actually advised his supporters to go vegan. And I just thought that was powerful. And the family is from Eritrea, and Eritrea is like next to Ethiopia. And I've never been to Africa, but I would love to visit Eritrea sometime and visit Ethiopia sometime. And even this past year, I actually got to visit or touch down in Europe for a couple of months. And I went there. I had this Nipsey Hussle jacket on. And I was like, I'm taking Nipsey Hussle to the Eiffel Tower. Like, Nipsey, yeah. J.T. the L.A Storyteller, all of Los Angeles. We're out here in Paris. Like, nothing's going to stop us. We're going to keep going. So, yeah, there's a way to keep repping that. And our communities have seen a lot of different leaders come and go over the years. And so shout out to all the lives that we've lost in this. And that's another huge part of how to remember what you're doing this for, right? Like the fact that you get another day. If they were still here, would they be speaking up? We may never know, but certainly if we got the chance to say something and move and shake through that, then I'm there. Just like I'm here for this podcast, for the Social Primate podcast. Last episode of the year. Let's go.
Hell yeah. Yeah, you got to make the time, man. I mean, I've said that before. Like, whenever you want something, just like you said, you got to make time. You got to figure it out. You got to plan it out. You got to make the moves, And again, that goes back to even being involved with the city. It is difficult, but I think they're also the people who are in charge of creating these schedules, these meetings. They should consider the fact that all these people are working, which I'm sure they do, but sometimes you get into the point where bureaucracy itself is not playing in the favor of the community, and that's when you kind of have to come out and do your thing. You got to voice it. You got to fight for what you need.
Big facts. And that's really what I'm thinking about with respect to 2024. We have this election coming up. And there are two versions. There's like a mini election in March that kind of low-key but high-key starts in February. And then there's this election in November. And one guy is like 2 Supreme Court decisions away from maybe being the first president or potential president who's gonna run his office from jail, perhaps, if that's what it needs to come down to. And the other guy is the oldest man to ever have served in this office, and he is clearly not fit. He's clearly not in his A game, and it's a huge concern. And then even while that might be happening out in DC, I remember hearing somebody say one time that, like, for the presidency of the United States, everyone around the world should get to vote, actually. Like, it shouldn't even be limited just to people who live in the United States, because the presidential office has so much influence across the globe and impacts so many different people that, hey, like, they should all have a say in a democratic world. Now, that is one thing, but bringing it back to this side a little bit, how does the election impact our neighborhoods and our people and the dividends that we get? You mentioned bureaucracy, for example, and like whether or not city leaders are making time. And that's at the city level. But then what about at the state level? And then definitely what about the federal level? And if those folks out there on the federal side are being hired on or brought on by someone who has made their way to office strictly by denigrating or dehumanizing our communities, then what are we doing in response? And it's like J.T. the L.A. Storyteller is going to be there. Like, I'll be right there. I'll do my best to get this info out to the people to the best of my ability, because it's a must. It's a must.
Yeah, I mean, there's been times where I'm like, what? How did I not know about this? Like, but again, it comes down to the individual themselves too. You know, if you're interested in this stuff, you're going to go online, do your research. You're going to read captions or headlines. You're going to look into them. And that seems to be the problem. I think a lot of people sometimes don't care, you know, and it goes back to the initial question that we had at the beginning of this is like, how do you make people care?
Yeah, I think that's, again, a great question. And that's a question that any city leader, that any city planner inevitably has to face, right? Like, there are, for example, that new Southeast Metro rail line that you and I talked about.
Yes.
Put out a vote in order to basically hear from people about what would be the best name for this new route. And then, in addition, as the project develops further, they're going to have to invite the community, and they're going to have to, like, knock on some doors and hand out some flyers and invite as many of the Southeast communities over to the table. But then, just like you said, given the fact that most of these communities are working class to the fullest extent, and they're making their bread and butter from 9 to 5, and then at home they've got kids that they need to feed and raise, like, when on earth are they going to get an hour and a half to 2 so that they can make their input on this project? And those folks need to figure that out. It's not impossible, but it's going to take a lot of intentionality, and it's going to take a lot of meeting people where they're at. And I really see Social Primate, or the Social Primate podcast, and also J.T. the L.A. Storyteller podcast as being a part of those archives there, right? So, like, for the Metro planner who is over at the Metro HQ, who's going, how do I tap in and how do I really learn more about the community? Lo and behold, there you have the Social Primate podcast. And so your voice and your work actually ends up being a public service. You're like a mini NPR out here with the Social Primate podcast. You are, because at the end of the day, for somebody who has this intention, who has the goal of going and learning a little bit about that side of town, there it is for them.
One quick note that it's a great example that you brought that up, because I didn't know they were looking for names until I came onto your show.
Right.
You started telling me, and I see the options that do reflect what the community is about, and other ones that just were like pretty bland and like generic,
Yeah, and you know what? It's still a long way out. Like the so-called democratic process that we have in this country is obviously in need of much, much revising. And it's in need of a whole lot of remaking, because at the end of the day, we see that these systems can only get so far. So I don't think that it's like the community's fault or the neighborhood's fault or working people's fault for being working people. Like, they are who they are, and they are having to survive through the system as it has been laid out for us. And so for me, it's kind of like It's not about going and guilt tripping anyone, but it is a matter of saying, let's see what we can do to bridge two worlds, especially as people who speak two languages or something to that effect, and as people who know how to toggle in between a set of different worlds, going from one neighborhood to the next, code switching through these neighborhoods, speaking as we must when it comes to those customers we have to serve and so on, and then speaking with our family, and then speaking truth to power if and when necessary. And so it's all a matter of having a comprehensive, extensive, and empathetic conversation about what these neighborhoods are in need of, and how city and state and county and federal, whatever resources are out there, how they meet us where we are, because it takes two to tango. It always has, it always will.
It's funny that we were talking kind of about the bureaucracy part of the stuff. Just a few days ago, I saw just a movie called Shin Godzilla. It's like a Japanese Godzilla from a few years ago. The point of the movie was, it was in the perspective of the government telling the story of what's going on with Godzilla. And basically, Godzilla's destroying it's destroying Japan, but the government's not acting because it has to go through all this red tape. Like, we don't know whose department it is. We're going to figure that out. Okay, meeting. And this whole time, Godzilla's just destroying the city, right? But it goes to show that when it comes down to the political process, or the process of just doing stuff, again, in bureaucracy, you're like, what the fuck? Like, you got to do all these steps just to get a solution for something that we see as so simple.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you bring that up. I think it's Godzilla -1, right? I think that's what it's being.
The new one's
Godzilla's.
The new one is Godzilla -1, and this one, the Shin Godzilla, is from like 2016, I want to say, or something.
That's really cool. I'm gonna look into it. And for me, Godzilla, that story is all about the way Amazon is Godzilla in San Bernardino or Southern California. Because at the end of the day, Amazon is spending billions upon billions, not only to buy up warehouses, but to buy political clout, to buy silence, to buy obedience, to buy credibility through these working communities that need far more than Amazon has to offer for them.
Exactly.
Right? Like, and there you go. Amazon is tearing it up. Amazon is having its way. Amazon is benefiting from these tax cuts, including tax cuts from 2017, and they just get to do that. Mm-hmm. While our city leaders, our city officials, our state and federal officials have their arms folded and they don't understand what steps to take. When for us, it's very clear that, like, hey, if they have unfairly gamed the system, then they need to be held accountable just like anybody else. If we run a red light tomorrow and we are stopped for that, then so should these companies when it is that they are acting out. And Amazon is very much acting out and needs to get regulated the way that is appropriate, especially with respect to these communities on the Southern California Inland Empire side. So shout out to San Bernardino and shout out to all of the neighborhoods that have made their voices heard, especially with respect to how these companies are not it. These companies are not it for what they need over the course of the next couple of years, especially with respect to the climate crisis and the housing crisis that our communities are facing out here. So by all means, people, in that respect, what I also really like is that there are ways to tell this story that aren't all about just sort of handing that information to people in one way. Here you're talking to me about a foreign film that basically gets it. And I love that, because I think that there are various ways to engage the convo. Some of us are very much about being right there, holding up that microphone to that city leader or state leader's person, and then saying to them, hey, like, what is next? And then for others, it's like, hey, I'm going to tell the story the way that it works for me and the world that I come from or am engaged with, and so be it. That's what's going to work for now, and we're gonna find a way to bridge all of it, in my view.
Yeah, just for some background for the people just tuning in on the Amazon stuff. from my understanding, they're trying to open up like the largest Amazon distribution place. I don't know if it's in SoCal or just the west side of the United States. One of those two. It's huge though.
In the whole U.S.
In the whole U.S.
Yeah,
Oh,
because Cali's the biggest
shit.
state. Well, yeah, with
Yeah.
respect to Texas.
We'll say California. Nah, kidding. We respect the Texas. No, seriously though. Yeah. So the largest in this.
Yeah,
This is what I'm saying. Like, imagine how. I mean, they already have the influence.
Yeah.
You know, they have the money. It's just they're sweet talking people at this point. You know.
yeah, and they have more fulfillment centers in California than in any other state in the nation. And they've spent at least, I believe, $68 billion in California alone just for warehouses. And I was doing a little bit of this calculating, and I realized that because, like you said, they're trying to build not just any kind of warehouse, but large, incredibly, unprecedentedly large
Yeah.
warehouses through the Southern California region, specifically through the Inland Empire, which includes San Bernardino County. And I realized, okay, there are people who are unhoused or unsheltered there. And if you took like maybe 2 of Amazon's 1 million+ square feet warehouses, you could house everybody that is currently unsheltered on that side of California. If you took just 2 of Amazon's warehouses, you could house most of the people who are unsheltered there. And yet that's not their MO. That's not what they're about. And I think that more and more people are becoming aware of the companies getting its way through that side of town or through that side of the state. And I think increasingly in the next couple of years, we can connect more of those dots and make clearer demands, even though there have already been people on the ground and at the university or at the scholarly level who have already formed coalitions there and called out their leaders, written to the governor and all. But now, I mean, I can at least tell you from where I'm at in LA that, hey, like from the Inland Empire to Los Angeles in 2024 and beyond, we're going to amp up the pressure on that because I know that there's a way here. And I think Amazon knows that there's a way here. It's just a matter of time. So let's go.
Yeah, no, the work has to be done. But again, it's important. These conversations, no matter how small they are, it's still bringing awareness, right? And that's ultimately what we do want to do. We want to bring that awareness. Again, podcasts like yourself, you guys are doing, or you're doing, because it's you. You're doing such a great job at putting these resources together and this information where, again, somebody like me, somebody who doesn't go to these things, who doesn't know what's really going on outside of my city, gives me the opportunity to be like, let me tap in.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that it's also so key in the case of, I mean, I was thinking about it just very briefly, but in the case that tomorrow there's a huge disaster, which is possible. Any day of the week it's possible. But if in the case that tomorrow there's a huge communication blackout and we don't know where to begin, and it takes a little bit of time to pick up the pieces. For me, as soon as folks get back online, it's voices such as yours, and it's voices such as J.T the L.A Storytellers, and it's voices like these other community-based resources or platforms out there that I'm definitely looking to first and foremost, right? Because I want to see where they're at. I want to hear from them. I want to trace as much as I'm able to from connecting through these mediums, because it's always spoken to me that way, and I think it'll continue to do so. So if tomorrow we end up like in Terminator 3 and we have to like put 2 and 2 together so as to hear the latest broadcast from the Sela side or from J.T the L.A Storyteller side, then let's do it, because it's for the public good. Mm-hmm. It's for us. It's for our city. It's for the species. It's for anyone and everyone who cares about the value that all these people have brought to the table and continue to bring through their survival. So let's make sure that they're not just surviving, but thriving one by one.
Yeah, at the same time, that's gonna make you proud from like where you're coming from, like the city that you're in. Like, there's been for a long time, I was like, oh, I live in Cudahy. People are like, what? Cudahy? Cuda what?
Right.
And it's like, oh, I'll just be like, oh, I'm from Downey or something. I'll say,
right.
That's like the main point where people know where I'm talking about. But if people ask me like, where you live? Honestly, I was a little ashamed to be like, oh, I'm in Cudahy. I'll say Downey because it's more upscale, right? It's like the Beverly Hills for Latinos.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, I'm Downey. I'm Downey. But after a while, I was like, I'm not Downey. I'm Cudahy, man.
That's right.
So now I carry myself a little bit with that representation. Like, Cudahy has its things. I mentioned to you on the podcast when we did yours. It has its thing, but it's on its way up, I would say,
Yeah, exactly. And the Social Primate podcast, just like J.T the L.A Storyteller podcast, these platforms are also on their way up. And for me, for those city and official leaders, or for those seed donors, those angel donors out there, those philanthropists out there, those folks who are really trying to get behind platforms that are grounded, that are independent, and that are based on uplifting these voices, these are the kinds of projects to fund. And I very much believe in their value. I very much believe that if you decided to sell it tomorrow, which I know that you won't, just like I won't, but I know that if you decided to sell it, you would have a very high asking price, and a justifiably high asking price, because at the end of the day, it's priceless. Mm-hmm. You can't actually put a number on exactly what Eddie or Jimmy may bring to the table. It's just like the multiverse, where like a very slight difference in the circumstances at play can change the entire scene, right? If Social Primate Podcast didn't exist for like the last 4 or 5 years, what would be in its place?
Yeah, I know. That's a trip, huh? Yeah.
I don't even know.
There has to be something that would have taken its place, some sort of other...
Maybe, but maybe not. That's the other thing, too. Like, it's not guaranteed that, like, if Eddie decided to just pause tomorrow, that we would still get the Southeast LA perspective, and that we would still hear from folks in this very specific way and on a consistent basis. And so, like, guess what? You therefore have a pretty neat resource on your hands, and like, it's doing something. It is literally filling a gap and creating a space that wasn't there before. And you may be one out of many. You may be one out of 10,000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 even, who is specifically dedicated to this project. And hey, that's a high price point for me, like, because you don't just recreate that very simply. You don't just like find somebody from wherever and then make them the new Eddie or the new J.T. the L.A Storyteller. Like, those things just happen to be here right now. So like, give these people their flowers right now. I'm giving you yours. Even I don't have a bouquet, but I see a little tree in front of me. So here you go.
Thank you, JT. I'm gonna carry it like the Oscars. Nah, it's awesome that you put it that way, because anybody just starting their own project, whatever it may be, sometimes it feels like you're just doing it and nobody's paying attention. But when you hear words like this, it's like, damn, you realize that you are putting knowledge or information, most importantly, more information into people's hands, and that's how, when I got influenced by podcasting, that's how it started. I wanted to know more. I was influenced by the information. It made me curious. And then from there, critical thinking starts. And then from there, everything else is just endless possibilities of where you can go with that info,
That's right. And some people, like, some people maybe in their mid-20s or like their early 30s, like, they decide to go to school for a PhD and to spend the next 9 years like doing this and learning the ins and out of one institution or another in order to come out with this or that project. In a very real way, you've done that, and I'm up to that just as well, but on my own terms and in this way. And that has its ups and its downs, that has its highs and its lows, just as you were saying, like real strengths and real shortcomings, but it's entirely yours. And like, the fact that it continues getting built out, and the fact that you can now look at all this time and know that you've met all these different people, and then maybe even plan for the next year very concertedly, very intentionally, that's cool. Like, that's just cool. I think a younger version of yourself might want that for you, right? Like, and I think certainly people around you, certainly peers or contemporaries, will note to you that, like, hey, that kind of work is not just fun, it's something a lot of people think about doing, but that they have a difficult time just breaking into, and yet, lo and behold, here we are. And so tomorrow, if Eddie wanted to, if you, Eddie, wanted to, like, you could hold a workshop on how to start a podcast for a neighborhood that is little known, somewhere out in Texas or Florida or Washington. And you can note to people that, like, hey, here's a little bit of how I began, here's where I'm at, and here's the value I see it serving now. If this is something you might be interested in too, then cool. And there are plenty of folks doing similar work out there already, so I don't see why not.
Yeah, it's something I've been planning. I'm hoping, 2024 is around the corner. By the time people hear this, probably already 2024, but that's the goal. I think with everything, it should be the goal. Evolve and grow, tackle on new things, like just get out of your comfort zone. And one of those things has been, again, for me, just that self-growth, trying to put myself more out there. So I'm definitely inspired, again, by what you do, the words that you just threw at me right now. Like, it's cool, man, because, again, this is what we need to bring each other up. It feels good to hear compliments, to hear good feedback, whatever it is, constructive feedback, even if that's the case, because somebody's paying attention, somebody cares, and they want you to keep doing it,
100%. And I got a chance to meet with this cat, Javier, or Fu Hauser, who does Californiography, this past weekend. And like,
that is,
another cool cat came up on the southeast side as well. And we're also talking about these collabs coming up. And for me, it's kind of like, man, it's going to be a whole lot of fun to break bread with Javier, as well as with yourself, as well as with all those out there who are doing very similar work that is ultimately in the interest of the whole, the public good, and the betterment of all of us. That to me is like democracy in action. That to me is like, hey, this is what the system didn't create for me. Now I'm making it on my own. Lo and behold, like, there you have it. That's exciting. And so in 2024, I look forward to, breaking more ground with you, doing some vision boarding, and just making sure that we're bridging more of those dots, as we noted at the outset here. I'm excited about it, really.
Hell yeah. No, same, man. I feel good about what's coming up, and again, just networking, meeting people, showing up, taking the chance, just talking, networking. That's going to take you, even if it's not at a career-wise on a high, it's gonna let you grow as an individual. And dude, I don't know what else you can ask for if it's just self-growth too.
Just like those Haitians, man, just like those Haitians and those rituals way back in the 18th century, when these folks were bridging away, despite all these language barriers between themselves, despite being in the most severe and inhumane conditions, they still found a way to uplift their spirit, to make sure that they affirmed each other,
exactly,
to heal each other, to breathe air with one another. And so when we do that together, just like this, again, the cumulative effect, you cannot predict that. You cannot.
I love how you put that, because it's not something, I don't know if I'm using the right word here, tangible, that you can give to somebody. It's just something that grows internally as individuals, and that creates something, even if it's nothing you can hold.
Well, that's why when you said let's do the podcast, I was like, hey, you already know. Like, it's not even a question. When you said let's hop on and let's put one more together before the end of the year, let's do it. By all means, we're on the same page for it. So truly, I'm honored to be on this platform with your community. Shout out to all of the Social Primate listenership. It's been such a pleasure just connecting with you this year, and I look forward to getting some time to sit down and do a little more of the envisioning that I know that we're going to get to, because it's there for us. It's there for us to hone in on.
Yeah. At this point, we found the people. We just gotta, we gotta cook now.
Hey, let's go.
Hell yeah.
Get me a double patty. with some Thousand Island sauce on the side, please. Thanks.
You got it. I'm gonna get some of that slap your mama sauce too.
Eh.
Nah, dude, JT, well, dude, thank you so much for taking the time to do the Social Primate. For people to find out more about you, well, I know you have a bunch of stuff going on, and I know we didn't get to all of that, but I want people to take the action, follow you, share your stuff, and just get to know you more. So where can people find you?
Yeah, just go to @JimboTimes on Instagram. See the link tree there that has everything. It has my podcast. It has a newsletter that I'm a part of. It has my website for sure, where you can read a little bit about my time with the city of LA and also this election year coming up. Find me there. Find me talking about voting a little bit, even though I know it's not my people's favorite. Nonetheless, it's kind of like I'll be there, and if you need it, hey, there you have it. So I look forward to getting more of the Social Primate podcast listenership on there, and then getting more of J.T the L.A Storyteller podcast onto the Social Primates radar. So let's do it. Let's bridge this gap from the city of LA all the way to Cudahy.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Well, JT, thank you again. And I hope you have a great rest of the 2023, what we have left of it, and a magnificent 2024.
Hey, let's go. We're in it together. Let's do it.
Let's do this.
Hey,
take care, everybody. Peace out.
Peace.
But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family. Ever.
Yeah, me and my liver ain't friends, just a mean to the ends. I put this beam to your lens, dog. This caliber mean, it blow your head off, chest off, street sweeper coming clean the rest off.
Took a loan out on my dues and scratched till I paid them back. Played the cards on the table straight flush and I laid them flat. Never know what they got till it's gone and it fade to black. Heard a couple sorta dope, but baby that major crack. This that residue they fiend for, coming straight off the digi clock. Snorted through a Washington sniffing and hit the diddy bop. Ask who really hot, raw raps, I got the city locked. Doing something dirty, whatever till I get filthy pop. Tell me this and that, but ask me I'm calling all cap. Baby game beyond rap, leave them sick off the contact. Really built for combat, smoke them just like some strong packs. Love to get loose, just know that my pistol compact. This that raw crack, they hit it and leave they jaw flat. For those who wrote me off, redemption straight out of Shawshank. Ghetto Andy Dufresne, baby got birthed in blue flame. Fiending for my dope, tap twice and they find a new vein.
Yeah, me and my liver ain't friends, just a mean to the ends. I put this beam to your lens, dog. This caliber mean, it blow your head off, chest off, street sweeper coming clean the rest off. I'm going everywhere with a vest off, red dot, headshot. I ain't making legs drop, lead talk, dead walk. Homie, don't you test chop, could've hit me on my worst day with your best shot.
It's your favorite nigga Rican. Fly off the coast for the weekend. Mix the sequence with the jack I'm tweaking. Pack with 240s and a 40 so I can sip while I'm op hunting. The black wick M4 with a rocket button. And no matter the losses, hustle regardless. More money's always the target. Rap niggas calling themselves artists cause they rockin' gallery department. Y'all ain't Baby Lee, you garbage. Now this the dope that have the fees doing the rope. But dope for one sting of my illest quotes from coast to coast. We bragging both. So when I touch the mic it's mass murder. The blicky designed to leave you all icky. No Timmy Turner. Cause the street code in my nature nothing. Let's play with my family then that Glock on your chest like Tretch. Whoa. Now welcome to the faculty. Your thieves come from a cloth of murder and struggle. This rap should come with ease.
Yeah, me and my liver ain't friends, just a mean to the ends. I put this beam to your lens, dog. This caliber mean, it blow your head off, chest off, street sweeper coming clean the rest off. I'm going everywhere with a vest off, red dot, headshot. I ain't making legs drop, lead talk, dead walk. Homie, don't you test chop, could've hit me on my worst